Okay. Okay. Welcome everybody again. I'm sorry for the mix up with the emails going with 8:30 and 8 o'clock, but so happy that you could all make it. I'm very excited for this event. I just want to give like a little short, very quick, nice ideas to just get us started these next few weeks with cleaning and getting ready for Passover. Just a nice little idea to start with and to re-energize ourselves with. Um, so I just saw this amazing, this great clip from Brene Brown. So I'd love to show it to you and share my screen, if that's okay with all of you.
How many of you are blamers? How many of you, when something goes wrong, the first thing you want to know is whose fault it is? Hi, my name is Brene. I am a blamer. Let me just tell you this quick story. So this is a couple years ago when I first realized the magnitude to which I blame. I'm in my house. I have on white slacks and a pink sweater set, and I'm drinking a cup of coffee in my kitchen. It's a full cup of coffee. I drop it on the tile floor. It goes into a million pieces, splashes up all over me. And a millisecond after it hit the floor, right out of my mouth is this: "Damn you, Steve." Who's my husband? Because let me tell you how fast this works for me. So Steve plays water polo with a group of friends. And the night before, he went to go play water polo. And I said, hey, make sure you come back at 10, because I can never fall asleep until you're home. And he got back like at 10:30. And so I went to bed a little bit later than I thought. Ergo, my second cup of coffee that I probably would not be having had he come home when we discussed. Therefore, and so the rest of that story is I'm cleaning up the kitchen. Steve calls, caller ID. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey, what's going on, babe? What's going on? So I'll tell you exactly what's going on. I'm cleaning up the coffee that spilled all, like dial tone. Because he knows. How many of you go to that place when something bad happens, the first thing you want to know is whose fault is it? I'd rather it be my fault than no one's fault. Because why? Why? Because it gives us some semblance of control. But here, if you enjoy blaming, this is where you should stick your fingers in your ear and do the na thing, because I'm getting ready to ruin it for you. Because here's what we know from the research. Blame is simply the discharging of discomfort and pain. It has an inverse relationship with accountability. Accountability, by definition, is a vulnerable process. It means me calling you and saying, hey, my feelings were really hurt about this, and talking. It's not blaming. Blaming is simply a way that we discharge anger. People who blame a lot seldom have the tenacity and grit to actually hold people accountable, because we expend all of our energy raging for 15 seconds and figuring out whose fault something is. And blaming is very corrosive in relationships, and it's one of the reasons we miss our opportunities for empathy.
Okay, so I'll just reiterate. So she said this great little piece, and I was just kind of laughing, and I thought, oh no, why am I laughing? This is for sure too close to home. But what she was saying was that she, in the morning, she had a nice, beautiful, delicious cup of coffee, and she was wearing, of course, white pants and a beautiful outfit. And as she's walking in the kitchen, boom, the coffee spills all over her. And of course, the first thing that goes to her mind is, oh, my husband, Like, it's my husband's fault, right? We want to blame our husbands. And she said, this is how fast my mind goes. She's saying, like, my husband was going out with his friends, and I told him, please come home a little bit earlier, because don't come home after 10, because I need to go bed early, and I can't go to sleep until you're home. I just can't fall asleep. So of course he comes home at 10:30, and that made her go to sleep a little later. And that's why she's on her second cup of coffee, and it's his fault that she had to have a second cup of coffee, and it fell on the floor. And that's why it's all over the floor and all over her beautiful white pants. So she was really talking about blame and how we blame other people for things that go wrong. And when something bad happens, the first thing that we do is we want to blame, even if it means blaming ourselves, because blame just, it just sort of puts something to it, to that bad thing that happened to us. So I was thinking about this idea of how the opposite of blaming is taking accountability, right? Because when something happens, you can stop and think. It doesn't mean that you can't understand where it's coming from, how this bad thing happened. It just means that you're really just understanding it and then taking accountability for what has happened. And I think this is what the Passover message really is. Passover message is not about the Exodus story. It's not just about, oh, this is what happened to the Jewish people back then. They were enslaved back then. They were freed back then. All these miracles happened to them back then. It's not just a story that happened way back when. It's a story that's happening right now. It's us. We are those people. And we have to live the whole story of the Exodus as if we are those people. We are becoming free. But what are we becoming free from? And I just want to, in order for us to understand that what the Exodus really is we have to understand and look back in the Torah and see, how did we get into exile in the first place? And the way we got into exile in the first place is what the Torah says straight out. We were sent into Egypt because Joseph spoke badly about his brothers. Period. They were sent into Egypt. And they were enslaved for hundreds of years. And we're still going through some sort of exile because of that same mistake, because we speak badly about other people. And we really have to just stop and think and say to ourselves, especially this Passover, not to only say, okay, we're ready to go and become free and we're gonna like relive the story. We're not just reliving, we're really like, we are the story. We are now all in exile right now. And we have the ability to come out and to be free. And the way that we can become free is to understand how we got here in the first place. Not to blame and say, oh, those Jews, it's all because of them. They spoke badly. That's why we're all in exile now. That's why we're dealing with COVID right now. That's why we can't go flying on vacation. That's why I have to do my kitchen again because I didn't spend money on vacation, right? I have to blame. It's so much easier to blame. But really, the real thing that we really have to do is really look at the Torah and say, what happened? What went wrong? And how does this apply to me? How can I take accountability? How can I take responsibility and make a difference and make a change so that I can come out of this exile and become free? So I think that if we just, stop to think for a little bit about how we got into exile in the first place, about speaking badly about other people. And that means even forwarding a message that came on WhatsApp. That means rolling our eyes or looking at someone in a bad way, because those things can really kill. I was just telling one of my students this crazy story, how this was a true story in the newspaper, how somebody's pizza store was completely shut down because one person complained on Facebook and said, the pizza was so cold. And everybody responded to this message on Facebook, and the whole entire pizza shop had to shut down because they lost so much business because of one complaint on Facebook. So we have to be so careful with our words. And I think that this is such an important lesson, especially nowadays when we're wearing masks on our face. It's like so clear to us. Hashem is telling us, put the mask on your face, stop talking, think about what you're going to say to other people, think about what you're going to look at, how you're going to look at other people, and just become free. Get out of exile. Don't be in exile anymore. Don't blame, take accountability, and make a change. So I hope that this year we can all make a change together and just speak nicely about each other. And really, especially in this month, I really, really want, I've been working on it with my family as well, talking about the different rules, the different ways that we can change the way we speak to each other, the way what we say to each other, how we forward text messages and funny videos, and to really be conscious of it so that we can just become free this year, and hopefully we'll become free. I would like to, I'm going to introduce Nellie, but before I do, because Nellie's not going to say it because she's so humble, I just want to thank Nellie so much for sponsoring this event. She is so generous and so kind, and she did it in the memory of her father, who should have his neshama should have an aliyah, and it should be a very big, amazing merit for her father to for us to really come into Pesach with excitement and a new organized home, with new organizing ideas, with a freshness and excitement for this beautiful mitzvah. And Nellie has not only sponsored this, but also helps out with all the Rosh Chodesh events, with all these Zoom events, and gets sponsors for other events. And I really appreciate all of Nellie's beautiful hard work. And she always does it with a smile, quick, that's it, I'm doing it, I'm going. And it should be a very big, beautiful merit for her very beautiful father, who is so kind and so giving and so soft, and just have beautiful memories of him. So thank you so much, Nellie. Nellie, can you introduce Elana, please?
I'm not letting you talk ever again.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm just going to introduce Elana Kleinman, who is a wife, mom, professional organizer, teacher, and speaker. She owns EK Organizing. When she's not helping her clients simplify their homes or editing student papers, Elana spends her time walking her way to 10,000 steps daily. So, Ilana, please take the floor. Thank you so much for being here and helping us out.
Thank you so much for having me this evening. A good Chodesh, it was Rosh Chodesh today, Nisan, so we're getting very close, Baruch Hashem, to Pesach, and I'm very honored that you've asked me to speak this evening about getting organized in general and specifically for Pesach. And it's jam-packed what I have to speak, so I hope I don't go over my time limit. I told Frady I could speak basically for hours about organizing, but I'll try to allow you to get back to your Pesach prep after I'm done this evening. Here we go. I think everyone could see this. Yeah, everyone can see this, right? Okay, amazing.
Yes.
So I'm using this mostly as just something for you to visualize yourselves, but hopefully you can also see my face. Usually when I'm in front of a crowd, I'm moving, I'm dancing, I'm shaking. So I hope you get some of the energy of how excited I get about organizing and helping people to realize that it's not a burden and it's actually really simplifying, and it helps you a lot. So that was your flyer, and this is my business card. So the first thing you should all realize is that as women who run households, very busy households, many of you don't even realize how organized you already are, and or maybe some of you do, but we all run households, big families, smaller families, extra things to do, outside jobs, inside the house jobs. There's so many things we're already balancing, so that anyone who feels like they're so disorganized, at least take a moment now, give yourself a little bit of credit for how much you always do on a daily basis without even realizing how much of it is organizing and structured and making sure everything gets done by a certain amount of time and everyone gets what they need and all of those things. So first take that minute before we hop into the official organizing talk, because you really are doing it even without realizing that you're doing it. Also, if anyone has questions, I guess maybe Frady, you could put it in the chat, and maybe at the end, Frady will ask them, or you guys can ask them directly. It doesn't matter to me how you guys do it. Okay, so I'm gonna do, let's say, part one on general organizing, and then we're gonna hop into Pesach organizing specifically, and then towards the end, we'll get that live demonstration with a bit of tips that I could give to everybody who sent in their little areas that they would love to see fixed. So that way everyone gets helped, even if we're not specifically focusing on you. So the first few things are general, that the good news for everybody is you can learn to be organized. Everyone thinks that it's this innate skill, which for many it might come innately, but there are ways to learn it. And there are certainly tips and tricks that you can start adding into your daily life. So it's not that some people, are just born with it and then that's it. You give up on yourself. Of course not, because that's what, teachers, organizers actually coach their clients. The goal when I work with a client, for example, is to let them do it on their own eventually. Otherwise, I can't move into their house. So I don't just help them figure out how to fix an area, but how to keep it that way. So this way they don't need to keep calling somebody and using very valuable resources to keep getting somebody into their house. Also, it's a process, which you all know, it's step by step, and I'll go through some of the steps with you. And it's not perfection. I know that especially these days, there's this new book and the show, The Home Edit, and all of these other very glitzy, fancy, color-coded type of organizing styles. And they're gorgeous and they're amazing, but they're not so realistic for most of us. And so if we can try to set aside those images of those perfect magazine covers and memes and all of the things we see online, that it can really make you tense, because you look at your house and you say, there's no way my house will ever look like that. Most of our houses will not look like that, ever. These are people who are paid a lot of money to come into your house and color code everything, and they spend a lot of your money to buy matching colored containers and matching colored book covers, and all of those things that you see is very, very expensive, and it doesn't get any more organized than if we were to do it with the kits that you got. And one more thing, green tape, painter's tape. It can be done with dollar store items the same way. So it's not about perfection at all. The other things that I think you all know, but it's nice to be reassured, is that organizing is very personal. So everyone always wonders, how does an organizer come in and they just throw out my stuff? It's not really what we do, but what we do is we help you walk through the path of saying, you know, why do I have all of this, and how do I make it a little more functional for my family? And maybe I'm keeping it for you know, silly reasons, or I don't need it anymore, and there's other ways for me to memorialize whatever it is you're keeping. So it is a very personal thing, and each home is going to be extremely different in terms of what they're going to get rid of and what they're going to display and what they're going to put in storage. So each person is different. And the more important thing for you to remember is that when we talk about getting rid of things or purging, we're not getting rid of your memories, but the items that maybe we inherently put all of our memories into these items, and we think that if we get rid of it, then it means we're insulting the person who gave it to us, and they you know, they're not around, or we won't remember this moment in our lives because we're getting rid of this particular item. So we have to also understand and that the memories themselves are always going to be there, and we just need to find a way to make it less messy, if that's the word you want to use. So sometimes people take pictures of the item, sometimes they've stored it because it's so valuable to their family, but they never see it. They don't get any enjoyment. So why not, you know, build a little shelf and put it on display if it's so valuable and so meaningful and so memorable? So there's, you know, we're not trying to throw things out. We're trying to find ways to preserve the memories without creating a home that is cluttered and uncomfortable to live in and stressful. So those are good points. The other thing is, and a lot of us know this as people who run households, is that it takes a whole team. If you have 2 people or 5 people or 8 people living in a home, everyone sort of has to know what's going on. Obviously, as you know, I don't know who runs your own households, but whoever runs the household generally does most of the organizing, let's say. But if everybody doesn't understand that that's happening, then you can create as many homes for items as you want, but everyone needs to know where things go. Otherwise, it's never going to work. So it takes everybody to at least know that it's happening, and to recognize that, you know, here's where things go. So that way, at least when they're done with it, it gets in the right place, even though you're the one that might create the place, design the place, label the place, and do everything that's involved. I actually saw a hilarious, I don't even know what you call it anymore, these videos online. And it was a mother who, the kid calls out, where's, you know, do you know where my keys are? And she says, yes, it's in the left drawer, underneath the stairs, under the hats, next to the gloves. And then the husband says, do you know where this is? And she again gives very exact directions, second shelf to the right, behind, on top, and the third one. And then the mother says, does anyone know where the fish food is? Because it's not in the drawer. And the kids are like, we have a fish? The idea being, of course, that the mother knows where every item that belongs to every person is in the house. And it's very normal, but you need the group to make it work, okay? And it takes time. A lot of us see these images and it's overwhelming to think, wow, I can never do that because my house looks like it's gonna take 10 hours. And the truth is it might, but you have to break it up into parts. And that's really what we do. And part of what we're gonna do tonight, talking about Pesach, is how do we break it up into chunks so that the time factor doesn't feel impossible. And so you never start because you think, I don't have 10 hours. So why would I bother starting right now? Because it's never going to get done anyway. And you just keep setting aside the same projects because they're going to take too long. So we're going to talk about how to accept that it's going to take time, but still be able to function in little bits and pieces. Okay. And it's really important because obviously everything takes time and we just have to prioritize it. The other good news for everybody is there's nothing really wrong with being disorganized as long as it's not hurting you and your family and bothering you. So some people just feel like when you're so busy comparing yourself to someone else and you're like, oh, my house is full of piles. But if day to day the piles work and everybody knows where they go and everybody understands that this is how it is and you kind of have a method to the madness, then there's really nothing wrong with it, right? So the fact that everyone's on this organizing craze doesn't have to make you feel less than because you're not into it. And you're just like, my house runs fine, even though from the outside it might look like it's crazy. But from the inside, you know that it works and it's structured and the kids know where things are and both parents know where everything is and it functions. So if we stop looking into other people's windows, unfortunately with Zoom, we can see everybody's windows and we kind of are naturally comparing ourselves to what other people's houses look like. And I don't know if anyone's ever seen these ads or these comics where it shows how somebody prepares for a Zoom meeting where everything around them is perfect. But if you turn the camera, there's this pile of garbage like overflowing because we're only seeing this little one narrow diameter, but there's nothing wrong with it if it's working for you. The only time I come in is if it's overwhelming or it's stressful or you do want to start changing. And then, you ask for help or you do it yourself and you look up a million videos and you figure it out, but there's really nothing wrong with it. So before we get into the Pesach part, I wanted to give you a few quick tips of how to sort of get things done. It's not specific to organizing space, but more to day-to-day life. So one way is to have a 3-day to-do list. What that means is you kind of plan the next 3 days. I don't actually use an agenda with dates at all. I use blank paper. That's part of why Freidy's notebook is actually very cute, what you put in your kit, because I just take 3 pieces of paper and I start the list for today, tomorrow, and the next day. And I figure out spatially where those 3 days are going to look like for me. And then what happens is at the end of the first day, I'm able to transfer what's left automatically to the next day and start creating the third day at the same time. And if it works to do only 2 days, it also works. But the reason it works to do more than 1 day at a time is your list. I'm sure many of you have this, that your list ends up with 200 items because you're making a 1-day list, but you're trying to remember the 50 things you're going to have to do over the next 2 weeks. But you put it on 1 day's list. And no matter how much you tell yourself, I know I'm not doing all of this today, but looking at a list with 50 items is enough to break anybody and say, forget it. There's never a chance that this is going to get done. But imagine if you divide those 50 items over 3 days, and they're much smaller lists, and they're a little more doable, and each day's list fits with that day for whatever it needs. So the 3-day list really comes in very usefully in terms of just lessening the pressure and allowing you to spread things out without feeling you have to remember every detail all the time. The 2-minute rule is if it's going to take you 2 or 3 minutes to do it, don't write it down on your list. Just do it. Sometimes you don't have a choice because you don't have those 2 minutes to do it. But there are many times where I say, oh, I should write down to text so-and-so, but just do the text. Don't write down text so-and-so later. If you have the second to write it down, you might have the second to actually do the item. And of course, that's for shorter, quicker, like let's just get them over with type of items. But asking yourself, can I do it right now, sometimes helps you check off things off your list, even when they weren't on your list. But here's my secret. Sometimes I'll add that item to my list later just so I can cross it off. Because there's such a good feeling when you can cross things off your list. So even if you do it right away, later on, you could just say, yeah, I also called my mother today. Let me check that off. So it's a 2-step process. Sometimes the 2 bottom ones, the blue and the green, are a little bit opposite. One is, or sometimes they can be the same item. Sometimes you want to feel accomplished right away. So pick the item that's going to make you feel that because it takes shorter. It's less pressurized. There's no emotions related to it. So similar to the 2-minute rule, but something that you can do in a half an hour. You can walk away saying, oh, that's done. I did it. Let me move on to the next item, which might take a lot longer, but you feel like it gives you that momentum to keep going on your list. The other side is what's bothering you the most. The things that are eating away at you are eating away at you at all times. So if you get rid of that item, the rest of the items look a little less scary and overwhelming. There's a book called Eat the Frog First or something. I don't remember the exact title, but it is that theory that if you do that thing that is the most overwhelming, that is bothering you the most, it'll give you that ability to say, wow, I did it. And now all these other things don't even seem so overwhelming. So little bits and pieces to help you day to day maybe move a little more smoothly and a little less stressful, which is really the whole goal of being organized. It's not to look perfect. It's not so other people can think you're so amazing and put together, even though that's nice, but it's not really the goal. The real goal is that you should feel that sense of calm when you're approaching your life and say, okay, I've got this. I know exactly how I'm going to plan. I'm going to, and we all know things come in unplanned. And so of course we have to accept those as well and leave time for that. But what we can, which is mostly nothing because it's all in Hashem's hands, but we think we're in control. So we make all these lists and we hope that we can follow them as much as Hashem allows. Okay, one other key, which leads us right into Pesach. Normally, organizing is not cleaning. That's the key word when I'm telling people. You're not looking to, clean your carpets when you're moving the beds to figure out the configuration of the room. So I usually teach people organizing is not really cleaning. You have to separate the two. As we approach Pesach, of course, we can't separate them because everyone says cleaning is not organizing, cleaning is not spring cleaning, right? When we're doing for Pesach, we're not supposed to really air out our closets and start, freshening up the mattresses and save that for after Pesach when things are less stressful. And normally that is true. But there are times when the organizing part has to come into the cleaning. How do you clean? Where do you clean? Where do you start cleaning? What do you leave to the end? So there is a lot when it comes to Pesach, they're intertwined. Before I even go on, I do want to stress that the cleaning is it feels overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. There are many, if you ask any of your rabbis or anybody that you ask questions to, most of them focus on pieces of chametz. Of course, you have to do your best to clean, but areas that, and this is all from my Rav, who I just listened to a Pesach shir last week, so it's none of my ideas, but any areas that you don't ever move, if you literally have never ever moved your fridge, you don't have to do that right now. You might want to because it's filthy, but if that's what's stressing you out about getting ready for Pesach and you've never ever moved your fridge, you can wait till after, right? And the big chunks of bread is what you're worried about, and the Cheerios and the things that are a real factor. So we step back for a minute before we even jump into the cleaning and just realize that the purpose of the cleaning is to prepare for a beautiful yontiv and to appreciate what we're celebrating and commemorating. And like Frady said, that it didn't just happen back then. Every yontiv, the energy, if that's the word, I think that's the word, the energy of that yontiv actually replays itself every time you commemorate the yontiv. So it's not just a memorial of the yontiv, but the actual feeling of freedom that we had then actually comes back, and all of the same brachas that happened to us then, they're able to come back now. So when we're going into the cleaning, if we go into it with our end goal, which is to go into yontiv feeling this sense of we helped make a beautiful chag and we helped build this beautiful home where we can go into yontiv feeling good about ourselves, that's the focus of the cleaning, and not to make our homes magazine perfect. You'll see that's a theme for me, is that we're not looking to be magazine perfect ever, because it's just unfortunately a very unrealistic goal. Okay, so let's talk about Pesach a little bit. Everyone ready? Ready to clean their houses? I'm excited. Okay, so the first, of course, is that there's so much to do and what feels like so little time. And how will I get it all done? It's the biggest question. And especially when the second Purim is over, you kind of immediately, just like with any yontiv, you finish one yontiv and you're already sort of mentally planning for the next. And Purim comes so close to Pesach that it's a natural progression to say, okay, Purim's over, now what? I got to start cleaning. I got to start thinking, how do we do it? So I would say I've got two major tips. I took the liberty of, in some of my ladies groups, to ask people what their biggest challenges are with getting ready for Pesach and what their organizing issues are. And I got a ton of amazing responses that I'm going to share with you, and sort of some of the solutions I thought of when I saw what people are struggling with, because each of our homes is different. And so I wanted to make sure I covered enough of a spectrum that everyone here feels like they walk away with something that they can bring into their homes right away and say, wow, I'm ready for Pesach. So one of the things that a few ladies said was, do your best not to compare yourself to others. And it's the same as with organizing, but even more so with Pesach. You're going to have those ladies that have their Pesach chicken soup ready the week after Purim. And they're going to tell anybody who wants to listen to them that their chicken is ready and their soup is on and all their counters are ready. And you look at her like, what? I'm still eating the challah left over from Purim, and my kids have chips and pretzels coming out the wazoo from their Purim bags. And how on earth is this lady already have a chicken soup on, right? So all it does is cause us unneeded anxiety. Everyone's household functions differently. And so the more you listen to everybody else, the less you're going to feel confident about what you're going to implement in your own home to make Pesach as beautiful as it can be for your family. And that's the goal, is privately, personally, how are you going to take whichever tips help you the best so that you don't have to look at someone else. And a few ladies wrote, do not compare yourself to other people. It's very, very difficult when you see what other people are doing to be able to feel confident in your plan. The other thing is to keep it simple. A lot of people feel that they have to go over the top with recipes. And if that's what you like to do, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm saying the opposite. For those ladies who are feeling overwhelmed, that's what I'm speaking to. The ladies who think that they have to make gourmet meals for every meal of Yontiv, and they have to look up 15 or 17 new recipes for this coming Yontiv, and it's very stressful. If you step back and think about the simplicity, the whole point of Pesach is simplicity. We use fewer ingredients. We have fewer choices on the shelves in the store, although these days we have whatever we want. But in reality, Pesach was about lessening the amount that we purchased. And a lot of it was just plain chicken with spices, or plain potatoes with spices, or a whole bunch of soups. And so keeping it simple but yummy is very possible without turning it into this massive ordeal. And that goes for cleaning, it goes for cooking, it goes for any of the preparations you're about to hop into. To try to keep that in the back of your mind, simplicity helps you get everything done without it being a major project. So I'll give you an example. I'm lucky enough to have a little nook in my kitchen that is closed. And if you open it, it looks like a closet, but there's really a little sink and a little counter and a bunch of drawers. And it's sort of it's my Pesach kitchen, but it's really just a little closet. And so I was able to do some chicken tonight, but here's what I do. I buy, I'm going to say 20 or 30 pieces of chicken, and I buy a whole bunch of foil pans, and I spice all the chicken pretty much the same way. And I divide it up between like 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how many meals I'm planning to use chicken. And then in one, I'll pour in, let's say, sauteed onions and vegetables. And in the other pan of chicken, if you use sauces, I would make up some sort of sauce and pour that on that chicken. And then the third pan would be a whole different, whatever, concoction of some sort of chicken. So simple, the same spices, there's no real measurements. It's just, but at the end of the day, I'm going to have 3 or 4 pans of chicken ready in the freezer that when Yontiv comes, I just pull them out. So again, if your type is to use those time-consuming, very ingredient-laden recipes, I'm not telling you not to do that. But if you feel the pressure to do that, and you actually don't like to, take away that pressure and say, wow, I can make so much more if I just keep it very basic, and it'll still be delicious. We all know roast chicken is like the yummiest, and you throw under some potatoes and the chicken dripping from those potatoes is the best. So those are my 2 tips for that. Okay, there's 2 sides. If you have a Pesach kitchen, it's one way. And if you don't have a Pesach kitchen, it's another way. I'm going to focus on if you don't have a Pesach kitchen for most of it, because most people don't have that option. And on the side, I'll mention, obviously, those of us who are lucky enough to have a Pesach area that we can work on even while we're still serving chametz, most of us, it'll be self-explanatory that it doesn't apply to us. But for the most part, the question is, where do I do it? So start with your list, of course. We all know that. It goes basic. But when you think about Pesach, it becomes a little different because you need everything from scratch, unless you've made Pesach a few times. So what I would even say, I'm trying to remember if I'm going to cleaning or cooking first. Let's start with cleaning, because most of us start cleaning before we start cooking, okay? So the question is, where do I go first? Some of us have young children around the house. Some of us have older children who are eating bread as messily as younger children. So how do we create areas where we're not messing up one area and still able to function and clean not everything 2 days before Pesach? So it goes without saying that anywhere that food is normally not brought in is the easiest to clean, even though I know my children sneak food wherever they can, because it's much more cozy to eat when you're sitting on the couch or to eat when you're playing your video games. So there's definitely food in places there should not be. But having said that, we're not eating there every single meal. So start with the bedrooms, start with the basement area, start with the study, start with the areas that are normally not food laden. And again, we'll go back to our teamwork. The whole family has to be in on it. And even if they're not helping to clean it, but they need to know that this area has become Pesach ready. And so you cannot go in here. And it's usually a couple of weeks. I don't really start after perm right away because it's almost impossible to keep those areas clean for that long. Definitely the older your kids are, the easier that will be. But that's how to start the cleaning process. Now, for those of us who don't have Pesach kitchens, a lot of us are wondering, what happens when I want to start Pesach, but I've still got a whole other side of chametz going on in my same kitchen? And there's a lot of ways to do that. Either way, it's going to take zones. The only way to, I'm going to move it to cooking for a minute. Where do I put everything? So some of it is zoning. So I know I have a friend who sets up Pesach in her dining room. And for the time between, let's say the 2 weeks before Pesach that she already wants to start getting focused on Pesach, they'll eat in the kitchen, even on Shabbos. And everything for regular chametz stays in the main kitchen. And her dining room becomes her staging area for prep for Pesach. So that would include if, let's say you can make raw chicken and freeze it raw. So she'll buy her chicken one day and she'll make it on the dining room table and she'll Pesach stick her dining room table completely. And that becomes her Pesach prep area, usually near a bathroom. So that way she has access to water, obviously, to clean whatever dishes or utensils she uses. And that would mean also you can, some people set up, like, that's why I put this rack here. Some people have a rack that they use just for Pesach. So all of their appliances would go in the dining room. All of their spices or whatever it is they're going to need to feel like they're a little bit in control and started earlier, whatever they can make. Some people have portable burners even for Pesach so that they can start making their soup, let's say 2 weeks before, even though they don't have a Pesach kitchen. And then everything happens in that little staging area of Pesach. So you can feel a little bit less like you have to do it the day before. Okay, that does take a little bit of pre-thought. So that means we're going to get into, planning your menu and all that. But there are ways for even people without Pesach kitchens to be able to get started. And then this way, when you transfer your kitchen, everything is already out. All your utensils are available and ready, and you just bring them into your big kitchen once the kitchen has been turned over for Pesach. So it does help alleviate some of the last minute, because we all know setting up our kitchens takes up quite a bit of time, especially, if you don't cover them, if you just pour hot water that, I don't know if you've ever seen the river of water flying all over your floors as you kosher it. I don't know if anyone's done it themselves, but the hot water goes on the counter and makes this big puddle. And we used to always catch it with towels, and it was a process. So we don't want to be doing that plus cooking so we try to move things around and balance them. The opposite way could also happen. Let's say you want to turn your kitchen over earlier than normal. So you want to already have your kitchen fully functional for Pesach more than the day before or 3 days before. You want a week and a half. It is possible to do. It takes a little more forethought also. Because as we mentioned, if you keep your recipes simple, even during the week, when it's not Pesach, you can make a lot of what you would serve during the week in your Pesach kitchen. So you can make a regular roast chicken and serve it in your chametz area, but it's Pesach stick chicken and Pesach stick pots, and you just transfer it and then bring it to the dining room where everybody's eating there during the year food. You make soups the same way, and basically you're cooking Pesach for 2 weeks instead of 1 week. Some people like to do that because it allows them to be ready in their Pesach kitchen. What do they do with their chametz? Same idea. They have a rack. They move it to a whole different place of their house. They put their toaster, their weekday toaster. They put anything that's chametz stick, the cereals, any of that, and they kind of create a chametz section of their house. And they basically exclusively live in that little corner there. And anything that's regular, like chicken, roast, meatballs, whatever that could be made in the Pesach kitchen, is made separate and brought to the table just for dinner. So there are 2 ways to do it so that, again, you don't feel this sense of overwhelm that the night before Pesach, you've just finally turned over your kitchen and you have 20 hours of cooking ahead of you the next day. There's so much to do on Erev Pesach that the more ideas you can get of how you can make it work for yourself, usually it ends up helping you. Does anyone, before I go on to, I see a bunch of chat, are those questions, Brady?
Sorry, no, it was just nothing. It's
No problem.
nothing. But
Okay,
I
amazing.
do want to ask, before you were talking about organizing and getting everybody on the same team.
Yes, I should have paused before the next topic.
That's okay. So someone asked, how often do you have to reorganize everything and make sure that it's keeping up to par? Like, how often do you have to check in? Is it like a once a week thing? Is it, because it seems like when some people organize some things, it's like feels like, oh yay, I'm all organized, and then all of a sudden, like a few weeks later, it's like no one's putting the right things. Like, do you have to like replenish? Do you have to reorganize? How often?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is ongoing. That's the idea. It depends on the area. So, for example, when I get my mail, I open it every day. But once I've paid a bill, I've got this pile that has to be filed in all the different areas in my hydro or my whatever. That pile almost never gets organized because it's just so much faster. I've paid the bill, I'm done with it, I stack it in a pile, and then once every now and then I open up the files and I actually start slipping things in. So if it doesn't bother me, that pile, which it doesn't, because it's not a to-do pile, it's just a bit of a messy pile, so I keep it in a corner. But if there's areas that are high traffic that are constant, so we're lucky in that before Shabbos, a lot of us would like the house, the counters or the shelving or the surfaces to be emptied. So in a way, that's a blessing, that stress, because it forces us to kind of reevaluate every single week. Okay, this does not go here. Let's make sure everything has a home. And then once a week, at least everything gets back into its spot for one day. And then Sunday, the whole routine starts again and you get a whole week of mess. So some things really do function once a week. Especially like kids' schoolwork or like I said, mail that's sitting on the counter or anything like that. Those things can be put away once a week usually, and they stay maintained naturally because of Shabbos. Bigger items, they do have to be scheduled, and they do, everyone's behind on pictures, for example. When do you do pictures? When do you album them, right? So we all have this dream that the second we have, 100 pictures, we're going to print them and we're going to put them in an album. But generally, most of us are printing 1,000 at a time instead of 100 at a time. And we know it's a massive project. So that would be something that is ongoing. It's never going to really end. You can have albums that are dated and you can have them all beautiful, but there's always new pictures that are coming in. So those things take much, much longer. Each item on its own, you'll see in your households how it works. Obviously, kitchens, as long as when you're, let's say, emptying the dishwasher, you try to make sure things go back the same way. And when we do a kitchen drawer, once you set up a kitchen drawer a certain way, the more you can, every single time you put something in there, do it exactly the same way, the less maintenance there is, because it's just a natural progression of, oh, this is where it goes. And the more you can create that all over your house, the less of that kind of checkups you're going to have to do, because everything's already in its home. So it's just a matter of making sure it looks pretty, or, something got left in the middle of the floor. Let's make sure it goes back on the shelf. Kids' toys are the biggest issue because kids are dragging the toys everywhere. But if, let's say, once a week, right before Shabbos, everyone says, okay, all toys go back to the original spot and we'll start again. And the kids sort of say, but I'm in the middle, there's always going to be one or two that stays out. But overall, it means you get to start from scratch. You don't have this like tripping over boxes for the next 6 weeks because, you didn't do it. So I hope that answered, Frady. Yeah? Okay, amazing. So let's get into the cooking part of Pesach. It's combined with the cleaning, obviously. So everyone is different. I'll tell you how I do it. And then if it doesn't fit what you do, you can ask me questions and I can certainly answer it. But step one is figuring out the days of Yontiv. So I go to the calendar. That's really my first step, is I go to the calendar and I figure out when does Yontiv fall. Is it on a Friday, Shabbos, like this year, Matzei Shabbos, which adds a little complications, and I'll address that in a minute. Is it the middle of the week? Is it the one where it's, like, for me, the hardest, where we have Shabbos and then Yontiv is Sunday night. And then, so you're literally coming out of Shabbos, you spend the whole Sunday getting ready for Yontiv, and then you go back into Yontiv and you come out of Yontiv, but 2 days later you have Shabbos, and then 1 day later you have Yontiv. It's those years are a little more stressful that way. But the first thing I do is figure out how does Yontiv fall. And that's the best way to do your menu, at least for me. I won't say for you, but, and then I say, okay, so and I literally type it out. Meal number 1, meal number 2, meal number 3, who am I having, or would I like to invite, and what am I making? Now, the first year it takes longer, obviously, but when I go year to year, all I do is save as the new year, change the dates, and a lot of the menu items stay the same. I like to try to add something new, but generally I make the same. Once I have the schedule of what I want to make, I forgot to bring it with me, but the way I keep Pesach recipes, really I do this during the year too, but I have page protectors and I print recipes, or I photocopy them from cookbooks. And this way they're in a page protector, in a binder, in little sections of whatever, dairy, meat, side dishes, extras, like if some people make their own mayonnaise and their own grain or whatever. And then when I'm making my menu, I actually pull out the pages and stack them. So I know that these are the ones I'm using this year. And then I have a blank piece of paper next to me and I write the list of ingredients that I'm going to need to buy for all the recipes. So I go page by page. Okay, this one calls for ground meat. So I have a meat section on my grocery list and I add, okay, whatever it is, 2 pounds of ground meat. And then it says you need salt and sugar and whatever. So on the condiments list, I make sure I add salt, sugar, and then I flip over that recipe and I go to the next one. So now it's a balancing act. Depends on if you have room in your freezer or not. So if you don't, let's assume we're living with small spaces. If you don't have a freezer that is big enough that you can pre-shop like that, then what I would do is I would decide, okay, on Tuesday is my chicken day. So the night before or 2 days before, I take out all my chicken recipes and list all the ingredients I'm going to need just for Tuesday. And then that day I prepare only chicken. And I try not to, it's very easy to say, oh, but I'll just make one more thing, and that's where the overwhelm comes from. If you categorize a little bit more, the overwhelm doesn't have time to creep in because you've naturally calmed it down by saying, I'm only working on chicken. So like I said, you can do it the way I do it, which is 4 recipes of chicken all at the same time, 4 foil pans out at the same time, just spice it up, sauce it up, however you want to do it. And then, within a couple of hours, whether you cook it on the spot or whether you choose to freeze it raw, either way works. What I do is I label the top to remind myself that it's raw. I have gone into one yuntiv where the chicken was not cooked because I forgot that I froze it raw. And then we just didn't have chicken that meal. We had meat left over from a different meal. It happens, even to the best of us. But the best thing to do is to say still needs to be baked. And I actually write the baking instructions on top of the pan so I don't have to relook up the recipe. And sometimes I'll even add potatoes, missing whatever, and then I freeze it that way. So as soon as Erev Yontiv comes or the night before Erev Yontiv, I go to my freezer, I know what my menu is, and I pull out those particular items. And the next day is when the oven roulette starts because by then the oven's Pesach stick and you're able to cook it. So even if you don't have a Pesach kitchen, you can definitely prepare your raw chicken one day. You can prepare your raw roasts a different day. Side dishes are always the hardest because they tend to be last minute if you don't have a Pesach kitchen. Because you can't freeze a kugel raw usually. You can only freeze it once it's cooked. So that usually waits till the end, but that's really how I plot it out. So this way I'm not feeling like I have to cook 5 different things on the same day. I don't know if it works for you, but if I can focus on one category, then you kind of get into a groove. It's like a conveyor belt. When you're doing the same thing over and over again, you don't have to put your brain into it so much. But if you're going from a dessert recipe to a chicken recipe to a kugel recipe, all in the same cooking session, which we do for Shabbos all the time because we're making one meal, but you have to change your brain, right? To bake, you're separating eggs and you're using the mixer and all those different ways of doing it. And then you're moving into chicken, which is cooked differently, and then roast because you want to make sure it's seared properly and you want to. So when you're doing 5 different categories, it does get your brain, doesn't allow your brain to get into a routine. Does that make sense? So that's why I've learned for myself that doing it in categories means that I'm in routine. Tonight is chicken, all the chickens, done. Yeah, Brady? Yes.
No, I was just, that's really great. Paulina was just adding that she labels it on the top of the tray and also on the side so that she can see on the aluminum in the freezer. I also wanted to add that my mom actually taught me this. I always, after we kosher the oven for Passover, I always do the baking first so that everything is pareve and nothing is going to be in a meat oven or a dairy oven. It's all pareve, and you could have it with your milk. You could have it with desserts. So all my desserts go first. That's like the first day. That's what I do first, the desserts, and then the desserts are over with. And I don't have to focus so much, like you're saying, when you're focusing on like eggs and measuring, and that just makes me so crazy. So just get it over with first, and then I'm done.
Brilliant. So everyone has their thing that makes them comfort. My comfort is the chicken soup. Once this huge pot, I make a massive pot. It lasts the whole Pesach. I put it in somehow I'm like, okay, what's the big deal? We'll have matzah and chicken soup. If nothing else gets done, we still have a yontiv meal that's yontiv-y, right? So everyone has their thing that goes first, but the idea is to plan it out. So again, don't freak out and think by Purim you have to have all this ready. but these are just ways of getting you closer to Pesach without it becoming this, last minute procrastinated kind of project, which for some of us, it might be this nice adrenaline rush of like, how much can I do in the next 24 hours? But for most of us, we feel overwhelmed, and we'd like some tricks of how to bring it a little bit backwards into 2 weeks before or a week before. And so the way to prepare to cook is really knowing how knowing how the yontif falls, to know if there's, like this year, there's Shabbos, then there's Sunday and Monday. Shabbos is not yet Pesach, but of course, everything has to be ready for Pesach. We can't do anything between Shabbos and Seder night, which is Saturday night. So there's a little bit of juggling, because how do you have challah on Friday night if everything you're serving is kosher for Pesach, which it is. So everyone has different ways of doing this. Your kitchen is going to by then be fully Pesach. So clearly you're not bringing challah into your kitchen. So the question is, are you eating bagels on the porch? Which some people do. They do their hamotzi and they have a bagel because it's much less crumbly. Other people will have little bilkas because, again, they're a little easier to control than slicing a challah. Other people, like what I'm going to do, for example, is all the food's going to be Pesach dik, but our Shabbos table is going to be only plastic. So plastic plates, plastic serving pieces, everything is going to be disposable. So this way, if we do end up eating challah at the table, at least it's not going on to anything. And in fact, I'm planning to move a garbage can into my dining room or close to my dining room so that people don't even have to go into the kitchen to get rid of their plates. They can get rid of it in the other side of the house, and we'll wash whatever we need to wash on that side. So let's say we have a challah tray that we want, or a challah knife, for example, that there's nothing to do with it. It's Pesach in a few hours. We'll wash it in the bathroom sink maybe and put it underneath the, like in the little, whatever, the vanity, right? So everyone has a different way of doing it, because by about, I think it's around 10:30 on Saturday, Shabbos morning, we can't have bread anymore. So the other issue becomes, okay, so we eat the morning Shabbos Suda, everyone eats it pretty early. Shachris has to be early, so the men can have enough time to pray and still make it back in time to eat the meal before we are not allowed to have chametz anymore. So Shabbos morning becomes a little bit earlier. A lot of us are probably going to have at least one of the sudas by about 9:30 or 10 in the morning, even if that includes chicken and cholent, whatever, but it's a Pesach cholent. It's not the regular cholent. And then around 10:30, you can't have bread anymore. So the other thing that you might want to start thinking about is what you're going to serve your family between, let's say, 10:30, 11, and when the Seder starts at around 9:30, 10 p.m. that night. There's a big chunk of time for food. So again, people choose what they're going to do. You can either do milchiks at around 4 or 5 o'clock once everyone hasn't had meat anymore. You can have a dairy meal and maybe serve lox and cream cheese, but there cannot be matzah at that meal, and there cannot be beet bread at that meal. So most of us know that feeling from Erev Pesach, Friday, whatever, the night before the Seder is the same rules, but on Shabbos it's harder because we're just used to eating either challah or something. So I actually have a recipe, you could probably Google it, for like potato starch crackers. And they're not matzah and they're not bread, but they're crunchy. So if your kids like cream cheese, or if they like to put something on something, that might be an option. That's one of the things I'm planning to do. Other people are planning to just leave a second sort of Pesach cholent or kugel on their heating element or their crock pots. And then at 4 or 5 o'clock, they'll serve another dinner, but it's going to be like Pesach food, potato kugel, whatever schnitzel that you can make that's kosher for Pesach, any sort of thing like that. So you can also start thinking about with your families, what types of things you're going to be able to serve in those funny hours when you can't have bread and you can't have matzah, but everyone's really, really hungry. And having said that, the Friday becomes almost doubly busy because you're busy making Shabbos, but a lot of the elements of the Seder also have to be made because you can't do anything between Shabbos and going into the Seder. So those of us who have eggs at our Seder, hard-boiled eggs, boiling the potatoes if that's what you use for karpas. Some people make the salt water before the Seder. Other people can mix the salt and the water right before. All these little things, which if you don't schedule them, sometimes they creep up on you. So the more that you can remember from last year what you did or what your family did and write it down. So I'll give you an example. On my Pesach menu list, where I put all those dates and the list of what I'm serving, at the very top is the list of all the extras. Don't forget to make the charoset. Don't forget to boil the potatoes for the Seder. Don't forget to make sure you have salt water, whether you make it before or after. Make sure to order the mar, the lettuce, right? So all those things that don't really go with a specific meal, but they all have to get done. So I try to make sure to remember to have it at the top of my list so those items don't get forgotten either. Okay. The last thing I want to remind everyone is that perfect people are not real. It's my mantra. You see this perfection out there, it's always fake, always. It looks real, it's never real. It's photoshopped, it's the garbage hiding behind the Zoom screen. It's, you know, the person who shows off that they made their chicken soup 4 months in advance before Pesach, but they're yelling at their kids while they're doing it. So their household is in disarray for months just so they can say they made their chicken soup so early. Real people are not perfect. If you want to be real, you have to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses. Each one of us is going to be better at certain parts of Pesach and less good at others. And the more we can perfect the ones that we're really good at, hopefully the less overwhelming Pesach is. And the ones that we're not so great at, we ask our friends, we listen to an organizer sometimes, we find ways of switching it every year. And I can tell you, some of you are probably younger and making Pesach early in your life. Others are probably older and have made it for years, but every year there's something that gets a little bit better, a little easier, a little less stressful. Each year you add something that you're like, wow, I should have done that last year. I'm going to do this every year from now on. And it gradually just becomes this enjoyable, really fun time in your life rather than this overwhelming sense of, you know, it's just at the end, you feel so good. Your house is clean, the food is ready. Your kids really feel like they built up this beautiful yontiv, and rather than seeing their mother sweating and schlepping and you know, fetching all day long about this work that she has to do, the more we can ease into it and sort of make categories and prioritize. One of the comments someone made on when I asked about what their challenge was, a lot of people said, few people said, what is your sanity worth? So if you're able to afford extra help, I myself have help usually during the year only once a week. Before Pesach, just for 4 weeks, I ask her if she's available to come one extra day for a few hours and earlier in the week. So on Friday, she's still helping me get ready for Shabbos, but during the week on Tuesday or Wednesday, she's doing some of the scrubbing and I'm there to oversee it, but she takes out the fridge drawers and the things that I can't do nearly as well as she can. So I get an extra help for that day. Whatever you can do that you can say, this is going to do it for me, that I'm not overwhelmed, and figure it out for yourself. Nobody's going to be able to tell you what's going to make it easier for you and harder. You have to sort of take all the tips and say, okay, what's going to work for me today that I can make Pesach a little less stressful and a little more yontiv-y. Okay. Before we get to whatever our live presentation is going to be, does anyone have questions about Pesach specific or organizing specific or anything that wasn't clear? I think it was, but you know, sometimes I'm surprised. Brady, anything in the chat?
It was really, really helpful. I also wanted to just add that, you know, sometimes the hustle and bustle is what's so beautiful about Passover and also Shabbat, you know, like when it's so crazy, you're like, oh my gosh, quickly, go get the light, go get the oh my gosh, I forgot to rip toilet paper. And you're like rushing and all the kids are like, you know, oh my gosh, it's almost Shabbos, oh, we have to do this. And sometimes I think to myself, oh no, I'm giving them like a bad like feeling, like I'm so rushed before Shabbat, I'm so rushed before Passover. But the truth is that once like you light the candles and like you take in that deep breath, it's just like this beautiful feeling that you're actually giving off to your family. Like we're rushing, we're excited, we're doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, take a deep breath. It's starting. So that's also, you know, giving over a good lesson also. Like we're rushing, the rushing is part of the lesson and that's okay. The hustle and bustle makes it exciting and beautiful for the holiday and for Shabbat as well.
Absolutely.
So I think our lucky viewer has, you took a picture. I took the picture.
Yes,
so
this is the picture.
Alona, you want to show, Alona could show it to us, by the way.
Yes, I'm gonna unshare my screen for a minute.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi, Alona.
So maybe Alona, before you show us yours, I saw a bunch of different people send things into Frady. So as a general rule, and you'll see what we do with Alona, but generally any area that you want to really get organized, it's hard, I know it sounds overwhelming, but we usually, the step one would be to take everything out and almost create an empty space. And then sort it in a different area. Either bring a folding table or use your beds if it's your closet, but just start spreading out, seeing what you have and deciding what's going back in. Once you see your empty space, there's a certain feeling of pride, like I don't want to mess it up again. So you look at it empty and then you go back to all your stuff and you can sort of reevaluate, does that really belong there? Do I really want this space to look like it did before I emptied that? And so if a bigger closet, then don't empty the whole closet, maybe just do shelf by shelf. If you have a smaller area like a cabinet, then just do that corner cabinet. But really for anybody who sent in and said, oh, I need help with everything. So the best way to do it is to pull it all out, take anything that doesn't even belong in there. It actually came from a different part of your house and make sure you get it back to that spot. And then whatever you're left with that belongs in that cabinet that you just emptied, each item really needs to be almost like assessed and said, does it still fit? Does it still fit my house? Does it still fit the decor? I said I was going to fix it, but it's been sitting here for 6 years and I never crazy glued it or whatever. And you have to be honest with yourself a little if you're ever going to get to that. And then take it out. And that broken thing that's been in there for 5 years, you throw it out and you say, whoa, it took up so much space. Now my closet's empty, right? Or there's just so many items.
I feel like you're reading my mind. Like, how do you know this about me?
We trip over things that we don't even realize are there. And the second they're gone, some of it is because we spent money on it. Elana, I'm so excited to get to you. Just give me a second. Some of it, a lot of it is guilt that we spent money on this item. And how can we just get rid of it? When I say get rid of, I don't always mean garbage, ladies. I donate a lot of what my clients end up not needing, either in a donation box or specific cause, if that's what they want, or we have sometimes what the Diabetes Foundation comes to pick it up. When I say get rid of, I don't mean just dump. But even then, we think about it and we say, I spent so much money on this. Well, I should really use it. I should really use it. And the I shoulds is what prevents us from being able to get past it and saying, I'm not using it. I haven't used it. Someone else might be able to use it. And that money is spent, whether I keep it in my house or I don't keep it in my house. I'm not getting that $20, that $50, whatever it is. So all of those guilts, sometimes it's because it's an emotional item like we talked about at the beginning. So figure it out. If you love it that much, frame it, put it on the wall. We had that. I'll give you one quick example and then Elana will get to your drawer. I had a client who had her family's portraits. Her mother had been nifter. Unfortunately, her mother died. An older lady, and her father had remarried very happily, but she had her parents' wedding portrait, and there's nowhere really to display it because it's kind of, she didn't want to insult her stepmother, but it was very meaningful to her. But she had an empty basement that nobody ever went into. It was almost like an alcove towards her gym, let's say. It was a bigger house, obviously. Nobody ever went to this area, and it was a blank wall. Tons and tons of family pictures. I said, why don't you just create a family portrait wall right here in the basement? Every time you go to the gym, you'll see the picture of your parents and it'll be important to you. And every time you go to the gym, you'll see your husband's baby picture that your mother-in-law gave you. And she did within about a week or two. She was obviously and she immediately hired somebody and she really made a portrait wall in her basement. All of those pictures that were sitting in storage because she didn't know what to do with them, but she could never get rid of them. So when you're thinking about those valuable items, maybe there is a secret alcove somewhere that you can still display it, even if it's not something you'd put up in your main area, maybe in your little powder room or maybe in your own walk-in closet if you have one, just on a random wall. It doesn't have to be a normal place where you would keep it. So this way, these valuable memories don't get stuffed in a box in a cold cellar somewhere. When they're so important to you, let's figure out where they could go. So that's another trick of like, if it's worth money, your money's already spent. If you're never going to fix it, you're never going to use it, or if it's so meaningful to you, all of those items can be placed somewhere, and then you'll be left. You'll be left with very little at the end of that decision making that has to go back in the closet, and the closet naturally will just look better because there's less stuff in there. Okay, Elana, where are you? Do you want to spotlight both of us at the same time, Frady? Do you know how to do that? Hello.
Hi.
Hi. You're very brave. You want to show us your drawer again?
Sure.
We're going to do a 5-minute. You'll see it doesn't take that long. Elana's going to do all the work.
The Tupperware drawer
part.
that doesn't ever seem to get cleaned. So I have organized it, and then I'm like, oh, it's so pretty. I can't mess it up, and then it still gets messed up. So
right. Okay. So I have solutions for you right away. So of course, as we all know now, in theory, we're not going to do it on, it's possible to do it on the screen, but in theory, Alona's going to take every single item out and match it up with all the lids, which I'm sure she's done 100 times. So how are we going to prevent it from turning into this within, a few months of it being done by Elana all the time? Everything comes out. It takes about probably 5 to 10 minutes to take everything out. Categorize it. Anything that doesn't have a bottom or a top, for sure the tops by themselves, get rid of them. Elana, I'm telling you this because if it's big enough, sometimes, and a lot of my clients do it, they'll stand all the lids in one of the bigger containers. So not never, but it's less likely to get messy because all the lids are kind of standing. In fact, I had a client who bought a bigger Tupperware just for the purpose of keeping her lids standing on one side of her Tupperware drawer. And then the rest of her drawer was only the actual Tupperwares. And so Elana, you would take your square ones and your shorter ones and your circle ones, and then eventually only one side would be your lids. And then everything else would be your bottoms. So I know some people like to store them bottoms with the tops, but you must know that that takes up a lot more room. So if you have a bigger space, you could do that. And this way you'll never lose the top or the bottom. But most of us separate the lids and we find a way to do it. So Elana, I don't know if you can,
So I do have like some sort of like lid separation, not happening right now, but a little bit like where we would stack them like separately.
Right.
I obviously have to go through this properly and actually like clean it out. But
so that's what would happen
right
is we would take everything out, and Elana's going to have to do it on her own because I'm not there to help her.
Yeah.
Corona, unfortunately, most of us have had to do it on our own. But really the key is what we talked about with any closet, but specifically Corona. I liked Elana's because it was one category. So it's a little less overwhelming. And because it's so easy to make decisions. You look at Tupperwares, you're not emotionally attached to them. You pull them out and you say, bottom, no top, top, no bottom. That's already on the side for a minute. The rest of it you by size on the counter. You spread it out. Look at your beautiful empty drawer. And then you decide what size container do I need that would hold all my lids. So Elana, it's great that you stand them up. Sometimes the reason it'll keep getting messy is because every time you want to take that, if everyone can see that square Tupperware there, every time you're going to move the square Tupperware, the clear one, all the lids are going to tip over. Exactly, Elana. So all those will tip over to the left because, and then they're just going to get messed up again. So the more you have, I see someone said they had those side stacking racks for pans. So some people will use them. You can get them at the dollar store, you can slip them in, or you can just literally use one shoebox type of Tupperware, which I know Frady gave you as part of your kit, and see if your Tupperware lids will just stand there. So what happens is every time you pull out a Tupperware, you're not having this avalanche of lids fall on you. Okay. Thank you, Elana. But I did see people had closets, people had actual kitchen cabinets. It's really the same routine, no matter what you're trying to organize. The idea here is you want to look at your space and acknowledge what's there. The first thing everyone thinks of when they think of organizing is I need to go buy 100 containers. But it's actually the opposite. The containers happen at the very, very end. And often you will find you don't actually need containers because you've gotten rid of so much that you have loose containers floating around, and then you can start reassessing where those containers go. So the real number one is to actually get familiar with what's in the space. Take it all out, move it around, look at the empty space and decide what goes back in there. And then whatever's left, some of it will have a home, some of it won't, and then it might be time to take it out of the house. But whether it's that Tupperware drawer or your kitchen gadget drawer, it's all the same concept of making decisions and sort of sticking with them. And those of us who like a lot of things have to realize that their drawers or their cabinets won't look as organized as they would like, because there's only a limit to how much can fit in space. And that's not a negative thing. If you like all your things and you don't want to get rid of any of them, you just sort of have to prioritize in terms of when you stack things, right? You end up using the top ones the most, and the bottom ones you almost never get to because they're so hard to pull out from under like 5 platters. So you kind of have to just recognize that that's going to happen in your house because you want to keep all your stuff, and that's totally okay. But if you're ready to let go a little bit, then you can create any perfection in your space, because we're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to be perfect for ourselves to make it more functional and easier to use. Yeah.
Okay. So, hi. Thank you so much. That was so awesome. I wanted to maybe try to just do one more, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Mandy, would you like to do it? Would you like to show your area?
No problem.
Okay, great.
I have to extricate myself from my couch. Give me a second.
Oh, that's not always so easy at this time of night.
Oh. Which one,
Okay.
Freddie? I've
Okay,
got
so
this
show us one of
area.
the desks, I guess, or one of the tables.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I remember this picture. Okay. So I think, were there two that had counter space like this?
Yes.
Were they both from you, Mandy?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay, good. Amazing. So it's really, I know it sounds crazy, the exact same process. You bring a folding table, or even your kitchen table or your dining room table, if you're close to either of those places, and start bringing everything to that table. Now, instead of just dumping it in the same way that it's dumped there, while you're holding it and bringing it from the the credenza area, look at it and say, okay, what's this? This is the newspaper. So let me already start a newspaper category. And you kind of create a staging area on your dining room table or your kitchen table until you've basically emptied the entire shelf. And then once you're looking at your categories, obviously decide where they really go. And how to prevent it, I think, is the bigger deal, probably, I'm guessing. Because yes, you know where all this paperwork goes eventually in your head. And every time you see it, you know where it goes, you know which drawer it belongs in, and you know where it's supposed to be. So how do you prevent it from happening? That's where that maintenance that Freddie was asking comes in. So routines are very important. Like I said, I open my mail as soon as I walk in from the mailbox right away. I immediately take the envelopes that I just ripped off and I throw them into the recycling. And then I'm looking at a bill or I'm looking at a tax receipt. So if it's a receipt, I add it to my filing pile that eventually will get filed. If it's a bill, I put it right near my laptop, which is where I pay my bills. And I stack them in order of date of when they're due. So those of us who don't have automatic, because I keep forgetting to do my automatics and I'd rather have them there, right? And then anything else, if it's a book from the study, all those things, that's once a week, either before Shabbat or maybe on Sunday, if there's more time, that's when, you start saying, okay, this should not be here, guys. I want clear counters by Friday at 12. So just do a 10-minute or a 15-minute race around the house, put the books where they go, put the dirty socks where they shouldn't be. I mean, there's always things there. You're going to find fires and you're going to find, I know exactly what's in that pile. So you sort of have to, you know that there's homes for them. So it has to kind of become a routine that if you really want that cabinet to stay clutter-free, start with getting it clutter-free. And then the next day is when the routine starts of, okay, don't put it down on the credenza unless that's where you're going to access it. Like I said, with my bills, they do go right next to my laptop.
Okay, there's one problem though. I'm quite a creative person, so my brain is scattered most of the time. My husband is the organizer of the home. I'm usually the contributor to the crap that is everywhere, as are my children. So that is the biggest problem. My poor husband, I am gray, he is, But one thing that I just wanted to say, we immigrated here 18 months ago. So the process that we did before we came was so cathartic.
Yes.
Because it was literally, I read the Marie Kondo book because it was 2 years ago when she was so popular. It's like, yes, thank you, bye. It was the best thing ever. But in a year and a half since we've been here, we've probably collected the same amount of crap that we had at home in South Africa. It's unbelievable. And we keep saying, how is it possible that we have actually gathered so much trash things in such a short time? I don't know if everyone else is the same, but that is us. It just keeps propagating and more.
Yes.
So it's something
so
else.
I can try to address that. It is normal. There are ways to address it, even for people who are, like you said, creative and aren't always thinking routine in the same way. And it does make it a little more challenging. But if you really are, I guess, honest that you want to start opening up the space and getting rid of some of the stuff. And of course, moving is the best and worst time to do it because you're so stressed with timelines, but it forces you to really cut your stuff in half. So like you said, when you got to here, you have tons. But when you bring something into your home, there are two ways to look at it. Some people really go drastic, and for every item they bring into their house, they make a rule that 2 have to come out.
Good idea.
It could be garbage. It could be garbage, but you bring in 1 cup, a mug that is now your new favorite mug. Let's get rid of 2 mugs that we never use. So that's a drastic, because that's obviously minimizing, right? You're bringing 1, but you're getting rid of 2. Other people just exchange 1 for 1. As long as you get rid of something at the same time that you bring it in, then you're not adding, you're just replacing to the clutter. That would be, I would say, after the initial decluttering, perhaps, if you were to go through the process again, let's say, and you decluttered everything. Let's say you managed, just like you did the first time, to get rid of a lot of stuff. And this goes for anybody who's trying to get rid of stuff, and then it just keeps building. Then at that point, once you kind of cleared and gotten it to the point where you can live with it and it's not feeling like there's a lot of junk, like you mentioned, then might be the time to make the rule for everybody and say, guys, when you bring a new thing into the house, even if it's a bill, literally, let's get rid of another piece of paperwork. We don't need anymore. So this way we're not bringing in double. And it's the only way I can suggest for people who the routine doesn't work sometimes because you're not thinking that way. But if it's literally just a mathematical thing, I brought in something and I'm going to take something out. Sometimes that does help to at least balance it, if not minimize it, but at least to the point where you don't feel like you're just adding all the time. You're keeping it balanced.
I love it.
Minus,
Thank you.
get rid of 2 for everyone.
I like that.
But
But it's possible. It is doable, very much. Good luck, Mandy. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mandy, for being so brave and showing us your space.
Yes, very much.
And also, I was just at Costco. This is actually funny. It just reminded me, Mandy. I was just at Costco, and there was like this beautiful like silicone like organizing thing that they were selling, and this like religious Jewish lady looks at me. She goes, "Am I being sucked in?" I'm like, you are. You know, and it's just like this feeling like whenever you go to a store and you're like, "Oh, that looks so pretty. I want to just, maybe I could put it this way." And you're like just thinking in your head, but instead just to think to yourself, like, am I being sucked in? Do I really need this? Am I going to really have? And sometimes we just get sucked in, but whatever. You could always
100%.
return to Costco, right? Thank you so much, Elana. That was so helpful. And I can't wait to get them to Passover like with joy and excitement and freshness and an organized way. Thank you so much. And I hope that everybody enjoyed it. And please join us for the next time with the Thornhill Shul. We love having everybody. And thank you again, Nellie, for sponsoring and for helping to organize as always. And thank you all for joining.
Frady, someone asked me if I could just share my my information. So that's me. My company is EK Organizing. My website is ekorganizing.com. And you can reach me at elana@ekorganizing.com or by phone. Frady has my number. You can always reach out to Frady if you have any other questions. And feel free to ask me even just one-time questions while you're in the mode. I'll definitely just remind me that, I was on the Thornhill Woods Zoom and I just had one more question. I'm very happy to answer it. Frady has my number. I'm very good with text. So you can send me a text or an email and I'll try to get back to you quickly in between my Pesach cleaning. And thank you so much, Frady, for having me.
Thank you so much. It was so great.
It was wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good night, everybody.